S3, then you're calling that KMS, and every time you use an API, because every time you open a particular services that are using a KMS, it means that you're calling that encryption. And every time you do that, it's an API call. And per API call, it means you're being charged. But I came up with a strategy. Can we mute? Okay. So AWS now came out with a strategy that, okay, instead of calling that KMS key every now and then, use a bucket key. So that way you're saving cost. So if your S3 bucket have that, it will help you save costs every now and then instead of calling the main KMS key. That's the strategy of bucket key. So imagine that your company now says that, oh, we're trying to save costs. From a security perspective, we still want to ensure that we are our resource is encrypted. Can you create a config group that can do all of those things? It means that you don't have it here at all, so you have to write it as a custom rule. And that's what I did in this place. And I'll show you in a minute. I don't know why this thing's going to the back completely. We'll see it up. And I'm so sorry. So what's going on here? All right. This is what I created here. So if you look at it, I have about 9 AWS S3 bucket here. Only one has bucket key enabled. The rest don't have it, but we'll check on how to remediate this automatically and manually. So then when it comes to resources in config, these are the list of resources that was identified. So remember we talked about using AWS config for inventory capability. So here it would give you an inventory of all the resources in the environment so that way you can understand what is running in your environment. So this is a CloudWatch log. This is code deploy and all kind of things like that. So then aggregator. In the beginning, I said that AWS config, it's not a global AWS resources. It means it works based on region. So every imagine that we now enabled config rule on 1, 2, 3, 4, or including this 5. So we can create an aggregator that gather all the config information from all of these ones and put them here. Or if we're using AWS organization, we can still use config aggregator to aggregate all the logs in different accounts from our organization and aggregate them in one of these accounts as a delegated account, and all the logs can stay here. Then if you're now running some forms of CSPM capability or Lambda function. So your Lambda function can come to this aggregator and call all of those things and do what it needs to be done. Or maybe you want to ship this information into a particular SIEM to like what's it called? Splunk or Exabeam or all kind of things like that. You can definitely do that. So that's why I say config is beyond just remediation, but it's good if you are able to understand what the tool is doing. So everything that I explained here is the same here. It's just these are for the aggregator. So imagine that here I enabled PCI DSS, here I enabled GDPR, here I enabled any conformer path. So and then we now aggregate all of them here. So if you come to compliance dashboard or conformer path, you will see, excuse me, you will see all the compliance that you enabled, all the conformer, then you'll see all the rules that was created. You see inventory dashboard. So meaning that the resources that are sitting down in each of these regions, you see them. Resources that are sitting down in different accounts, you see them. The reason why you're not seeing anything here is because we didn't enable any aggregator. So that's why you're not seeing anything. Then if you come to settings, from settings, Remember in the morning when we enabled it, we said we did continuous recording. From here, you can stop it and you can change the directory, or I mean, direction of the bucket that you want to store your config information. And yeah, this is just everything about config rules. So the next thing is the remediation part. So that takes us back to this um, page. So here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be remediating a bucket login, a particular rule that is called bucket login. So first of all, we need to identify that bucket. We need to identify that control, the rule or control, either way you can call it. Then we can start the remediation. So for a visibility purposes, what I'm trying to do is that when config is enabled, the rule identify the non-compliant S3 bucket. And then here I'm using system manager to remediate that S3 bucket. And in system manager, you create documents. So here's the document that would remediate that particular non-compliant bucket. When I run the automation, this is where the automation happens. Then the bucket become compliant. If you look at this bucket, it's naked and now it's not naked. And you see this is red and now it's green. So that's what we're trying to do here. And also, we'll be looking into another one, which is uh, a, a bucket is publicly accessible. You can create config group to identify it, and then you can use Lambda function to remediate it. So, but the main one is this one. And the reason why I'm using SSM parameter is because SSM document is because not everything will be automatically remediated. I keep saying that because that KMS and every time you use an API, okay, so in a real world environment, you can't just automatically remediate a lot of stuff, but you can automatically remediate some stuff based on the agreement because doing so, automatically remediating some stuff might disrupt business, might break applications. What if that bucket one particular services is leveraging, or you can't just automatically remediate something, but you can automatically put some detective capability in control. Maybe a particular S3 bucket is storing PII and you don't want any principal interaction, human principal interaction, except application. So if somebody like me goes there and drop a bucket inside, then there's an automation that is triggered and will take out that bucket instantly, except if it is a service account that does it. So that's one. Or another one is maybe you have a control in your environment that says this control must be, this is our standard control. If you violate this, then your application is gone. So that can be also looked into. But not everything will be automatically remediated. You can say if a particular resources does not have, maybe you have a backup strategy in your environment that says that anytime a storage resources has a particular tagging, then a backup strategy will initiate itself and back up that resources. So for compliance purposes, maybe the engineer forgot to put the tagging, they can put an automation that search to identify that type of resources. Once it sees it, it takes it, hard tagging to it. That way, the backup strategy will pick that resources and automatically back it up. So that is an automation, which would not disrupt business, but it would also help business. So now, do you want us to continue with this hands-on here or go to security of GuardDuty and then come back to this hands-on? How do you guys want it? Like I said, I want it to be interactive.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
My name is Samuel. So I was wondering if you could just give us like an overview of the use case where you built this, and it would be nice to see. how much AWS charges for the resources you charge, like for each of the instance you run, just to know how running the cloud services and managing costs while running cloud services.
Okay, that's a good question. So, the thing about the thing about resources that you're leveraging on and what cost is incurred. At that point in time, you can't tell what cost is incurred, but what you can do is that each resources that you're running, you can go into AWS billing and cost management and look into your cost breakdown. So here for this month, this is my cost so far. And if you look into February, so these are the resources that I've been using with the cost. Then another thing you can do is that if you're working on config, you can come to the FAQ page and you can look into the pricing. Yeah, right here. You can look into the pricing and it will tell you how the prices work. So this is where you can find the pricing. It will give you a breakdown. I hope this helps, sir.
For sure, I did. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Yes. All right. So, um, before we come back to the hands-on, I know we don't have much time, so I want to quickly go to Security Hub and GuardDuty to enable that so we can see how that works. Yeah, I can come back to the hands-on here real quick. So let's go to Security Hub. Like I said, before you enable the services, you have to look at the pricing, look at the FAQ page, understand what it is. So for example, here it's telling us how Security Hub works. This is Security Hub. These are the findings. So from GuardDuty Inspector, may see it has different data source that you can get data from and analyze them here. And it's the cloud security posture management in AWS. So here, in Security Hub, I talked about Conformer Pack. Here is the same. So this is the foundational security best practices. You can enable anything you want to enable here. Let's say we want this, and you just enable Security Hub and give it a minute. It's gonna take a minute to start showing you. So here you will see controls. Um, yeah, you can say these are the controls. And this is the control, and it will give you criticality. So, let me go back a minute. In config rule, the difference between config rule and security hub is that if you look at here, we can see two things we're seeing. It's either compliance or non-compliance. Nothing like severity or anything or what kind of things like that. You can just see that none of these are compliant, these are non-compliant. But in security hub, it would categorize them based on criticality or I mean based on severity. So if ensure the S3 bucket used to store CloudTrail log is not publicly accessible. So it means that if the S3 bucket that stores your AWS CloudTrail log is publicly accessible, then that is a critical severity. But config group will just tell you that it is non-compliant. Just that this is non-compliant. You have to fix it. It's not complying with the with the control. But security hub will tell you that this particular issue is critical. Why would you let your S3 bucket that stores your CloudTrail logs, which happens to be the activities going on in your cloud environment, be publicly accessible? this is a critical violation. So it means that you have to fix it. So that's the difference between config rule and security hub. Then here, security standard, all the standard that we've enabled, you see them here. And the ones that has not been enabled, you can enable them to have visibility. So findings is still loading. Then you can integrate other tools into AWS security hub like audit manager, firewall manager, which are already integrated by default. So you can add as much as you can, but all of this is cost. And like I always say, everything is cost. You have to work with your cross-platform team. You can have cross like Falcon, you can add Wiz, you can, let me see if Wiz is here. Yeah, you can add Wiz. Wiz is a security tool. So you can do anything. Here, there's automation. You can create rule. You can do all kind of things. My course will explain more and all of this. So let's go to GuardDuty. Wait, hello? You want to say something? Okay. So here, like I mentioned in the morning, AWS has GuardDuty in different features. So this is malware or all features. Like I said, you open FAQ to understand what you're trying to enable. You can get started, enable GuardDuty. So these are GuardDuty plan. There's S3 protection. It's taking a minute to load. There's EKS protection. There's runtime monitoring. This is the cloud workload protection platform I was mentioning in the morning the other time. This one. This. So there's malware protection for EC2. So there's so much more. And recently they created an extended threat detection, which was part of their announcement in AWS, what's it called? reInvent in Las Vegas. We all went there last year. So this is all about AWS GuardDT. So my course, like I said, will put more information about it. So here we're going to look into bucket logging. So let's go and identify the control. Let's look for it. It's at the complete end. Jesus. All right, Chijioke. Yeah, Chijioke.
Confirm you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I wanted to ask a question. Um, can you liken this guard duty to Microsoft Defender? Like, is it an EDR?
It's a CDR.
Okay,
It's a CDR, not an EDR. EDR,
CDR CDR in
yeah.
what sense? Sorry,
So EDR is endpoint detection,
and
endpoint
response.
detection and response, while CDR
Yeah.
is detection and response. So it's for CDR. It's CDR capability.
Okay. So how about the security hub? Can you call it, what would you liken the security hub to? Is this a SIM solution per se?
Uh,
No.
So Security Hub is a CSPM solution, Cloud
Okay.
Security Posture Management. That's what
Okay.
Security Hub does. But GuardDuty is a cloud workload protection platform. It's a malware capability. You know how,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So if you have an S3 bucket that, let's say uh you're an hospital, you provide medical services, and you have patients upload their application through a form once they fill up a form. So if I'm a bad actor, I can attach a malware to a form and also pretend that I'm a patient and upload that file. And if you don't have a malware protection, it would mess up your environment. So that is where GuardDuty S3 malware protection comes in to help you prevent that kind of malicious activities.
Okay. So how about what do you call it? Security hub cannot do the same thing, right? It can't help you with that.
No,
Okay.
it cannot help you with that. It's a hub. If you look at it, security hub.
Okay. Oh,
It
yeah.
gathers findings from GuardDT, config, and the rest of other security tools, and give you all the things you need to see from a severity perspective. Like, your S3 is publicly accessible. This is critical. So
Yeah.
um, your your RDS is having a password visibility. This is critical. All those things like that. So, or maybe you created an S3 bucket, you did everything that you need to do, you just didn't enable login. It will tell you that it's not critical, but it's informational. I'm just letting you know that login is great because if you are able to see what's going on in the environment, you're able to see what activities is going on in your S3 bucket. So I'm just letting you know. So Security Hub will tell you, but config group will only tell you that, oh, this is non-compliant. That's all. It won't tell you more than that.
Okay, thanks. But I was just thinking about do you know about CloudTrail?
Of course, I do. So,
So yeah, okay, continue, sorry.
your question. Finish your question.
No, like I wanted to because I felt like CloudTrail should be able to do something similar because it
Okay.
also checks for configurations and compliance and all that and your
Mm,
API calls.
okay. So, for example, if I come here, let me show you something real quick. If I click these services, ECS, immediately
Okay,
I click ECS, CloudTrail is like Amebo. It will
okay.
just tell you that, oh, don't click ECS. If I click on billing, CloudTrail will say that I have clicked on billing. It will record it. So if I open GuardDT, CloudTrail will record it. If I open here, it will record it. If I
That's
do,
more like something that tracks your activities and your history, kind of.
that's all it does.
Yeah.
But you can use it. That's why I said that your security hub gathers findings from different tool
Friends,
sets.
yeah.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So
Hi,
now, okay,
Sean.
yeah,
I have a question for you. So last week I was speaking to one of my friends, and he told me how his Amazon shopping account was hacked, and he had 2FA on it, and he told me he hasn't logged on another person's laptop. So he showed me that someone actually shopped on his account, but he had to cancel the order. So I was wondering how is that possible, even when he has like 2FA and he has not logged in on someone's account. That was quite strange for me.
that's strange for me too. So you have a two-factor authentication on your Amazon. So maybe his phone is compromised or something, or I don't know. So maybe he You might have fall victim of, hey, send us this or something. I don't know. And I think what might be the problem is if his phone number or received text message is the second factor authenticator, then that might be compromised. And that's why you're being advised to use an authenticator app like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, or any other authenticator, or use a YubiKey if you can afford it as an authenticator. But I think that's what might have happened. I can't really say this is what happened, but from my own understanding, that might be the case. So if you're using SMS as an authenticator and your phone is compromised, so that's pretty easy to compromise as well. So always use a maybe an app authenticator or a device authenticator, so that way you don't have one single truth place or something like that. So that's single point of truth. I mean, so that's what I can say.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, I'm looking for one of the S3 rule. I think because I enabled conformer pack, and so I'm going to have to disable this conformer pack. Sorry.
Yeah, Sachin, I just wanted to ask a quick one. Sorry to interrupt you again.
No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah. So based on what you were saying now, you are talking about malware and all that and all that. If you are running your services on EC2, shouldn't AWS provide at least a certain level of security for whatever you are trying to do on their platform? Or should you also implement all these other services to secure your environment and whatever services you are trying to run on their platform?
There's something called shared responsibilities. AWS provide the environment. You put your application in the environment. It is your responsibility to set up some guardrails to AWS can help you encrypt your application. It's your responsibility to do that. So that's why it's called shared responsibility. Depending on the type of services you're using. If you want AWS to manage everything for you, then you have to go with their serverless services. For example, a Lambda function. AWS will run the underlying application. I mean, the underlying, compute services, patching, whatsoever. Your own is open the services, put your code, and run it. And if you are trying to host any application on EC2 instance, and you don't want to manage EC2 instance, then you can use their serverless, is it AppSync or whatsoever, or there are different AWS services that can give you that same flair. All you need to do is bring your code and host it there, and you're good to go. But there's something called share responsibility. So AWS has their part, customer has their part as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Sorry, I'm looking for. I've enabled a lot, so I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find that particular S3 and I can't find it because we have like tons of rows.
Mr. Shem,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I've been able to replicate the AWS config at my end,
Okay.
but what I discovered is while you are creating yours, you used an existing S3 bucket, right?
Yes, yes. But if
Because
you
my dashboard is empty. My
yeah, you need to create a bucket. If you create a bucket, give it a few minutes, it will identify it.
okay. I tried to use an existing bucket I had for now, and it was giving me an error that I didn't add a rule and they read a rule through it. I had to create a new one. I would
Uh,
have I would have loved that if you could help I've started from use something new or like a new bucket and let's see how your environment will look like. Then
1 second.
Could it be the IAM rules for the buckets, like the access for the bucket to the AWS config?
I think
Mr. Shaw, can I say something, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, whoever that asked the question, I'm not sure I got your name, but when you're creating an AWS config for the first time, on the page, you will see an option. When you enable recording, you choose the resources that you want to record. If you come down a bit, it will ask you for an S3 bucket. So you have three options to either choose a new S3 bucket. If you choose it, just down below it, you would see an S3 bucket, AWS config with some other parameters. It will automatically create it for you. You don't need to go create it and then come back. It will create it for you with the name AWS config something something. It is only when you choose an existing bucket that you'd have an error. And just below it, you'd also see an IAM config role. So you don't need to go create an IAM role and come back. If you choose the option to create a new role, it will create it on the spot and then goes back to AWS IAM to update it in your role list. So you might just want to go back and try it again. It
Thank
would
you very
work that way.
Thank you so much, Angela. I think it's one of the things I explained earlier when we wanted to enable it. So what Angela is saying is that let me help you, sir, real quick. So we're gonna come to let's go. So this is the bucket. So let me quickly go to config so that way you can visualize what Angela just explained. She just explained it perfectly. So here, Ohio. So what she's saying is that when you come here, I did explain earlier on as well. So she's saying that here you can decide to choose a specific resources or all. Then if you have an existing bucket that she said, you can see the existing bucket here, or you create a new bucket. So then you can decide to choose existing IAM role or you create a new IAM role. So this is what she's saying. And once you checkbox all of this, then you can click on next, then you create your config. All right, so this is the controls I was looking for, which is S3 bucket login. It says that check if login is enabled for your S3 bucket. The rule is non-compliant if login is not enabled. So real quick, S3, I know we've gone past our time. I apologize. So I'm going to open one particular bucket here, which is this one. If you open the properties, let's look at login. So you can see here as login is disabled, and this is the control. And if you look at the control, you see list of the buckets too. So this particular bucket is non-compliant as well. So what do you do is that if you come here, we're saying that we're using SSM parameter. So if you come back here and you click on action, yeah, you can do manage remediation. So when you do manage remediation, you would now, this is where I did all the remediation, but I'm showing you again. So number one, it say choose remediation action. So it's bucket login. That's what I chose. If it is a snapshot or whatsoever, you choose that. Then resource ID parameter, I'm choosing bucket name because that's the only resource we can use to identify. Then it now says that target bucket, okay, bucket name, bucket prefix, target prefix. 1 second. So target prefix is that I want it to record into a specific bucket because when you enable login, that login information has to be stored in another bucket. So target bucket, it's the bucket name. Then target prefix is the prefix in the bucket. So I will show you the prefix in the bucket in a minute, but I'm not going to save this so that way you can see what I'm talking about. So now if I exit and I come back into it because I already made changes in the past, you see it. So this is the bucket that I'm talking about, and the bucket is right here. So I'm using this bucket to store the login information of other buckets. So here's the bucket name, and here's the target prefix. So now let's go back. So this particular bucket doesn't have login, so I want to remediate it. And I click on remediate, and it's executing.
Sorry, why did you say the remediate button?
Oh, it's here.
Oh, okay, I see.
This is a manual remediation, so just give it a minute, and yeah, successful. But you can do auto remediation. Like if you come here, you can choose automatic remediation. So for the automatic remediation, you set a time frame, you set a maximum try and all those things in there. And once you click it, it would automatically find it and remediate it. But you have to be sure that that's what your environment wants. Sometimes you might want to, let's say Angela's team are the team that owns all of this bucket. I can't just remediate everything here without consulting Angela's team first and understand and discuss with them. Hey, Angela, your team has copies of bucket that don't have login capability, and we can discuss about it. Like, oh, this is for POC testing. This is why we're using this, or these two buckets in this place happens to be pre-production, and okay. Then we'll discuss until we come to an agreement. So we're doing charging, but I can't just boom, boom, boom and remediate all of them. No, I might break things and that can cost the business a lot of money. So always have conversation with the team before you do any kind of remediation. So, and this particular bucket, again, I want to do something. I'm going to open it to the public. And we're going to use Lambda function to remediate this. I created let me share something with it also in a minute. So yeah, you can open this GitHub page. It has the sample code. It has the Python file, and yeah, and what we talked about today. So it covers a few of those things. So here, where is that again? The second one is block public access. So currently we don't have a config group to identify this, but let's just assume that we identify this ourselves and we want to remediate this by using Lambda function. So here is the bucket that we identified. Here's the bucket name, and we know that it's publicly accessible. Yeah. I didn't have time to create a config group for that. Then you come to AWS Lambda. you can create a new Lambda function, call it AWS user group, and we're using Python. Then execution role, I'm using an existing role. This is just for test purposes. So I'm using a full Lambda role that is available, but from a security best practices, that's not ideal. You're supposed to use a role that only can assume the resources you're trying to work with. Then you create function. And so S3, what are we trying to do? Block public access. So to do that, we need to go to AWS Portal 3 page. So we can come here and do AWS S3 Portal 3. We click here. There are so many things we need to consider. Here, we're trying to do something. We're trying to modify. It means that we're trying to block public access. So there are so many methods here. I don't know which one it is, but I know it's access. So if I do access, I should see something. All right, I'm seeing delete public access. No. Which one again? Get public access. No. Okay. Put public block access. So this is what I'm looking for. I click it and I look at how it's being utilized. So here is the response. Client call pull bucket string, that's the bucket name. And I don't need all of this. Okay, you can see the public access is either true or false, so it's gonna be true. Ignore public, ignore this, gonna be true. So if you come back here, you see the same. All of this. So that is what we're trying to block using this. And so this is what, excuse me, this is what we're going to be using. So I already have a code that I created. I'm just gonna walk us through. So here, let me expand. So I'm going to explain the code. So to interact with a Python with a Lambda function, you always have to use the bottle import method, which is right here. Here they're using clients, but here I'm using S3, and I can decide to use clients however we want to. So I kind of put some explanation here. So I'm using a try and accept error is because if I just place this by itself, and if there's an error, it would just throw an error without explaining. But if I use try and accept, so this is where it tries the logic. And if it throws an error, this is where the error message comes. And here, this is where we're saying that I need you to put public block access to this particular S3 bucket. And here's the variable that we define for the S3 bucket. So let's go and find our bucket name. Here's our bucket name. I know we could decide that instead of hard coding the bucket name, we could decide to use, what's it called? This method. Where is it? That one. We could decide to use this method first of all. This method can help us get list of bucket. So this is where you run the the method, and this is the return of the method. So here you can now pass through this syntax, and you just do slicing and dicing in Python to give you list of the buckets. So you can, once you get list of bucket, then you can parameterize this place as well. Like then you just do some logic here that it would run through the entire bucket like a list. You do the first one, do the second one, do the third one until it's done. Then you can now say that, okay, bucket is completed here. But because we're just hard coding it, so I'm just using a sample bucket, which is this bucket. Now, here we're saying that once it's done, print public access disabled for the bucket name. And this is a return value. You can start to take this out or leave it there however you want. And this is the exception. So if there's an error, it will throw an error. So for the fact that we've already hard-coded everything here, so when we're deploying, it will ask for testing. All we need to do is just put any different value there. But if we want our Lambda function to run based on the event here, then we have to parameterize the event in the testing. So I didn't want to bother us with all of those things. So give me a second. Every
Hello,
Lambda,
sir.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you increase the fonts?
Oh, sorry, my screen is big. I'm so sorry. 1 second. How about now?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you, sir.
I'm so sorry. It's my monitor. It's a 49 inches monitor, so that's why. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
So I come here to set the timeout because the timeout was showing 3 seconds. So that 3 seconds is not enough for our Lambda function to run the function. So I change it to 15 minutes. Then we go back to our code. I open this guy and we deploy, and we're gonna run test.
You have not altered all the bucket names.
Sir?
You have not altered all the bucket names in the script.
No, I only passed. No, this is the.
Okay, variable. Okay.
1 second. All right, I need to create a test. All right, let me change this. Okay. Did you see what happened now? So when I ran the test, this is what it's showing. It's a public access disabled for bucket X save, and this is also what it's showing. So let's go back to that bucket and refresh. You can see it's blocked. Let's use another bucket for visibility. So to be sure that we're doing the right. I'm gonna do something real quick. Watch. This is the bucket name, but I'm putting a space in between. Let's see if our function will capture it. It won't. Error disabling public access parameter validation. Let's say invalid bucket name. So this might be an error you see, and you've troubleshooted without knowing that the problem here is the space. So welcome to Lambda function 101. So you remove that space. I know time is far too short. Yeah. Then you test. I help, we can do more hands-on in the future. So now this is remediated. So if you come here and refresh, your bucket is remediated. So this is for this, and this is for this. My intention was for us to cover more, but we can't. I'll see if I can share this with you guys before everybody goes. But back to Angela. I know I've taken much time. I apologize, but yeah, this is it. All right. Hello, Prince. Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for that fantastic demonstration. So I believe we've all been able to learn a lot and see how things work. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
All right. So now that we've seen AWS security automation in action, it's time for us to understand the concept and principles behind these services. Our next speaker is Angela Anyekwe, and she will guide us through the theory session, explaining how AWS config helps with compliance, how GuardDuty detects threats, how Security Hub centralizes security insights. So I'll just give a brief introduction. Angela is a cybersecurity analyst and tech educator with experience in DevSecOps, DevOps, cloud security, automation, and incident response. She has worked with tech firms and various technical schools, mentoring learners in cybersecurity, cloud computing, and DevOps. She's a good tech banter and has a way of making security look way cooler than it already is. All right, Angela, over to you.
Please, before you move on, sir.
Thank you, Prince. Okay. Is anyone talking?
Now go ahead. We'll have the question and answer after your session.
Oh, all right. Thank you very much. And thank you once again for having me on. And Mr. Shehu, thank you again for that very insightful, hands-on practical. I also learned something, a lot actually. So thank you very much. And shortly we are going to go over to get a deeper dive at AWS cloud security automation with the tools of the day. I don't know if anyone can see my screen.
It's loading.
Is it visible? Because I can't see it here. Okay.
It's not visible. We can't see your screen more. Yeah, we can see now.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we are going to automate cloud security with AWS config, GuardDuty, and Security Hub. So these primary tools, targets of for these two, for the two, or any other tool in
I think the network is fluctuating here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
The
can. The
network is from my
network is
side.
working enough.
Okay, so I think Angela's network just fluctuated. I think she's back. She's back.
Sorry, before he resumes, can I ask a question? What's the full name?
Yes, sir. It is.
Angela, your network is still breaking though.
And
A video is taking on the
okay, I've switched and I've switched and I've switched, and
All right, it's better
I
now.
think that is why. Is this okay? Okay, yeah, I've switched to MTN.
Yeah, this is better.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. It's smooth now.
All right.
But,
Okay, so I was talking about AWS config and what it does from the security point of view. It is a tool that helps to have a deeper dive into how your cloud security
I'm sorry.
configurations are complying with.
I'm sorry. Your screen. Are you still sharing your screen?
Hel- Oh my God. Is it visible now? I think I can see it from here.
Loading.
Yeah, it's coming up.
It's good.
Okay, are we good?
Yep.
good. All good.
All right. So I was saying that AWS config is whenever you want to manage compliance, especially at the organizational level. Every organization or every business have certain compliance standard outside industry. If you're in the health, if you're in payment card industry, you are in fintech, you are in energy, there are a lot of frameworks that your organization uses to make sure that they are compliant to security best practices that apply to the business where you have. So AWS config is a tool that helps you to achieve that level of compliance. So when you bring your cloud security frameworks or standards down to your business level, AWS config helps you to apply it. So let's take, for instance, it is bad cloud security practice to expose your EC2 instance security group to anyone on the internet. And most of us, when you're using this on a personal level, just because you don't want to go to get your IP address or you don't want to use Boto or any other more secure means, you will just leave it as 0.0.0.0-0 and means that anybody who has your or lays hold of your credentials will just be able to have an access to the EC2 instance. And on a production level, this is a serious bad cloud security practice. So another way, maybe your organization, they use their own personal organizational encryption keys. And let's say, for instance, S3. If you want to upload files on S3, by default, it is it automatically encrypted. That is encryption at rest with AWS management keys. But for a production level stuff, you don't just use AWS encryption keys. You have to use customer management keys or customer managed keys rather to be able to have your own more granular encryption method so that if anything happens, you are not blaming AWS. You are sure that everything is safe. So if this is the case and maybe a junior developer gets in and tries to do something and he or she does not conform to these best practices, So AWS config, if enabled, is what is going to help you to know that something has moved above or outside the security baseline. So before it works, there has to be a baseline. When Mr. Shane was talking, he showed us a set of rules. Those rules are like something that helps you to see what is not supposed to be seen based on industry level standard. I think AWS uses CIS benchmark and PIDXS very much in their AWS security, both as for your customer, that is security of the cloud. They have all those mechanisms for you as a customer so that when you come, it is easier for you to apply compliance based on what the general compliance standard out there and the ones that are more peculiar to your business and the industry where it is in. So another thing, with or without applying config rules in your AWS config configurations, it has a way of, Mr. Shen showed us an inventory. Most times you don't know how many services you have running on your accounts, especially those ones that don't get you billed at the end of the month. Some of these free services, SSM, CloudWatch, SNS, you have all of those things configured and sometimes you just forget and you leave them there. When you want to get an inventory of all of these tools, AWS config can give you. And now it behaves in such a way that Git does. It helps you track configuration changes over time. So when a resource was created, you get to see it. If as at then, when it was created, it was not compliant, you get to see it. If it was compliant, you get to see it. And if someone, let's take for instance, you go to update a security group rule and whether it is compliant or not, when you go back to AWS config, you are going to eventually see the track record or the path that led to the change, who made the change, when the change was made, what the person did, and this is the current state of your resources. This is where it was before, and this is where it is right now. So basically, like from the demo, if you applied auto remediation using AWS Lambda or SSM, you are going to have that track of configuration history to see when you were non-compliant and now that you have auto remediated using AWS Lambda. So all of these are just for you to be able to have a more bird eye view into your AWS resources and into everything you're doing in the cloud, especially when it comes to audits, evaluations, and configurations in your environment. So the next thing you want to look at when you are dealing with AWS config is S3 bucket. So there is no way you can try to have audit your environment. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So you have to get an S3 bucket. It comes there by, you don't need to go create it. I think most AWS services now, when you're using them from afresh, you have the option of creating on the spot without going to create and then come back to reuse them. So you have to enable an S3 login so that all your config details can go into the S3 for audits and evaluation purpose. If you want to prepare for SOC 2, you want to prepare for ISO 27001 compliance standard for your organization, they would want to look at all of these details. You have to go and check, your configuration histories over time. And if you don't have an S3 bucket enabled, it is fine. AWS config is going to keep it for you for a period of 90 days, after which it lets it go. So if you have a business, you need to store your logs somewhere, just in case of the future, if something arises or if you want to carry out your auditing and other evaluations. And the next one is AWS IAM role for config. Of course, in as much as all the tools are within your AWS account, they can't work on their own. So you have to create a role for AWS config. You either go to IAM to create the config role before coming to config, or just create it on the fly, click on create new IAM role for config, and it will just create it directly. Then here is one thing that is very important, Amazon SNS. In as much as, like Mr. Shen said, recording config can be very, very noisy. Trust me, in 1 minute, if you enable Amazon SNS and you create an SNS topic, you can create an SNS topic on the fly when you enable Amazon SNS, but you have to go configure it to either send messages to either a Slack channel, maybe SMS or email or other messaging APIs. You have to configure to send notifications somewhere. And sometimes it can be very, very daunting. That is why people don't, always enable Amazon SNS for config at this level. You can, when you get to a more top tier level, like it gets to security hub, you can now go and enable SNS for security hub, so that whatever security hub finds worthy of reporting is what you will find worthy of receiving. And there was something he said about auto remediation. If you want to have an auto remediation, I think it is best that you have an SNS config. The reason is that if something has been automatically remediated, you want to be able to know that it has been remediated. And if it is not something, it's not everything that gets auto remediated, aside from the times where it can spray things on the production level. From the security point of view, they might be, this is why you need to have a look at what has happened. Most times they could be false positives. So you want to make sure that you are not stopping a service that's supposed to be running from running based on something that appears to be true, but at the end of the day, it is not true. So that is another reason why you should enable SNS. But apart from that, it is quite noisy, especially when you have your AWS recording every aspect of your AWS environment. You don't want to have that. So the last one is AWS config rule. It works with rules. It is through those rules that you config is able to understand how to apply the compliance standard into your configuration. So if you have if you want to enable AWS rules, there are more than 80 to 100 pre-configured AWS fixed config rules in the AWS environment that you can always apply. But for production environments, they may not be so safe environments. You might want to create your own config rules to be able to ensure that you are seeing everything that you need to see without missing out on anything, right? So that is it basically about AWS config and how it works. So we're going to keep this aside and then come to the next one, which is AWS GuardDuty. So if you want to talk about threat intelligence in AWS, GuardDuty is a very nice tool for you to use because of how widespread the integration is. And one of I don't know, but one of the reasons why AWS Security is always a top pick for people when they are implementing security is because of threat detection. And what you mean by this is that anytime that something goes away from what's supposed to be, AWS Guard Duty sees it as it could be malicious. Let's take, for instance, myself. Let's say I'm a developer or I'm a cloud engineer. I work for a certain company. I'm using an example right now. So, and in my identity and access management inventory of me company, I live in Nigeria. I live in Lagos. This is my IP address. I'm supposed to work 9 to 5, and I'm supposed to use a particular computer given to me by my company, and I'm supposed to also use a certain IAM role or IAM assume role to be able to access certain resources in the environment. When this happens, and maybe for some weird reasons I traveled out of the country and I didn't tell anyone I was traveling, and maybe I go to the US and I try to work from the US, AWS GuardDuty looks at what I have been doing so far. And because I am no longer in Lagos, where my geographical location shows from based on my IP address, I'm using a different ISP, and I'm in a different geographical location, I'm using a different IP address. AWS GuardDuty is going to see it as if someone has compromised my account. Maybe because I'm able to log in because I have the company email address and I have the right credentials, fine. But it's going to see that someone has compromised my account. And why did someone compromise my account? Because it is seeing me from a different region. And because of this, it's going to raise a threat. It's going to raise an alarm that, okay, this is what has happened to this account. So this is for you to be able to come and check and evaluate that, okay, it could be a false positive anyway because this user traveled and maybe she didn't inform security team or she didn't inform her team that such thing has happened. So, but at the end of the day, you are actually seeing that GuardDuty sees it as if this is not within what happens on a daily basis from this user and this account. And based upon that, it maybe raises an alarm. And that is not all. So it's as a threat intelligence tool, it has a lot of threat feeds that it uses. AWS have their own proprietary threat feed that is fed into the AWS GuardDuty, and it also uses machine learning algorithms. It uses third-party threat feeds out there, and it has a whole lot of you know away from the normal baseline, things that look like they can come from a threat actor fed into it, that it's always very intelligent to know that something is or something has gone wrong. So when it's AWS Guide is sending you findings, there are things. First, it's going to give you something, it's going to give you severity rating. And from the security point of view, if AWS GuardDuty sends you a threat or a finding and it is on the critical side, you know that you should leave things you're doing to go attend to that critical event. It may actually be false positive, yeah, but you have to run to it. And if it is high, you know, okay, yeah, it is high. High is just very close to critical. I think it's just like two numbers away from what a critical vulnerability is. I think critical vulnerabilities ranges from, depending on the CVSS scoring system you're using, between something that has a, a number between 7 or 6.9 to 10, and then high has to be like between maybe 6 to 6.9, and then medium and low, I think low is between 1 and 1 to 3 level of in this CSSV scoring system. So if it is high, it also needs your very immediate attention. If it is medium, it also needs your very fast attention. And if it is low, that means it's just informational. You just have to look at it. Most times, low alerts are false positives, but you have to also look at it to be sure that you do your due diligence before you pass it on to the next phase of your incident response. That is from the security point of view. And then it shows you another thing called threat purpose. So what this threat purpose does is that when GuardDuty is sending you an alert, it is giving you it is not keeping you in the dark. So if it pops an alarm on screen, let's take for instance EC2 port probe or EC2 recon. Let's take for instance now the example I used initially, where a situation where you left your EC2 instance to 0.0.0.0/0 for anybody on internet, and somebody that There are a lot of publicly known just IP addresses there. There are millions of them. If you go to virus, go to abuse IPDB, you go to recorded features, you're going to see a lot of IP addresses that people have reported to be malicious. Maybe somebody with that IP address, for some reasons was able to get the name of your EC2 instance and some other credentials, and the person logged in. Or even if the person does not have the right credential, the person could try to brute force using some, trying different brute forcing mechanisms out there to be able to brute force into your environment. If whether it's successful or not, when GuardDuty sends you that alert on your screen, you're going to see something like SSH brute force. So that alone gives you an idea of what has happened. And it goes down again to let you know the affected resources. So you're going to see if it is an EC2 instance, if it is S3, if it is an RDS, or any resource that may have been impacted by that particular incident. And it tells you the tools that was used. If it was from the CLI, it was from the SDK, it was from the console. They used a custom scripts and all. And again, it has something called a feature called trusted IP list and then threat IP list. So in GuardDuty, you can go to make a list of, you don't actually need to make a list of trusted IPs, like you go online to research a list of threat IPs. Rather, you don't need it. It already have that in its threats feed. That is why it is very intelligent. As other tools are populating, bringing out those information, is by default. So you don't need to feel there is a particular need for you to add a certain IP, maybe an IP that you think is not publicly known to be malicious. You can go to your trees, the app is there. Whenever an IP, you can even try it on your own. You can use your own IP to, add your IP to the threat list and try to access any resource in your AWS account. It is going to tell you that this IP address, this IP address that is in the IP in the threat list is trying to access your environment, and it is going to actually rate it so high for you to know that this is actually something that is very cool and it needs very fast attention. And then, so that is it. Then AWS GuardDuty gets its findings. So it looks at CloudTrail logs, it looks at VPC flow logs, it looks at DNS logs, it uses threat intelligence feed, and these are not all. You can integrate it with your AWS firewall, you can integrate it with some other services. Now, on the CloudTrail level, CloudTrail is an Ansible tool, and every system, your system, if you're using Linux, you're using Mac, your system logs every activity you carry out on that system by default, and it is stored in some file, in some file systems inside your operating system. This is the same thing with CloudTrail. It does not have abilities to shout. It doesn't have capability to make noise. But what it does is to record every activity that happens in AWS environment. If you try to use SDK to access a resource, AWS CloudTrail will log it that you try to use SDK. If you try to use CLI, it will log it that from the CLI. Anything at all that you do on AWS environments, it's called an API activity. Especially, you see put, you see delete, you see get, all those put requests, all of them are API calls, no matter where they're coming from. And so CloudTrail is enabled by default, but it is enabled at a low level by default in your AWS environment. You have to go, if you want to enable it with GuardDuty and you want it to work well, you have to go to CloudTrail and create something called a trail. When you create a trail, you also need an S3 bucket because it has to store every log that it now brings to the S3 bucket. So whatever you do on your account, it sends it to S3 bucket, and then GuardDuty will run scans. I've forgotten the actual action it takes it to run scans, but I'm sure that if you give it within 10 minutes, anything that AWS CloudTrail usually take like 5 minutes to be able to populate your API calls in CloudTrail logs, and then after a while,
That's such a great
GuardDuty
idea,
runs
babe. That's such a great
scan
idea
whenever.
because bringing traffic first before.
Is anyone talking? Hello? Can anyone hear me, please?
Yes, sorry about that. I
Thought
think
someone
someone
was
mistakenly
talking.
muted their mic.
Yeah, we can hear
All
you.
right, all right, all right. Thank you. So I hope you guys are actually following. So CloudTrail, it takes like a little time to populate the tree. It does that. GuardDuty runs scans in your environment, and then it will bring out the result that CloudTrail has already logged, and it will put it there for you, whether it is something of a matter of concern or just something that you should be aware of. So now there is something GuardDuty does, and this is one of the reasons, or this is one of the ways that there is something CloudTrade does, and this is how GuardDuty is able to get a more detailed findings. So in security, we call it the five who's, and then there is a H. So who, when you see a CloudTrail log, you're going to see who made the API call. You're going to see what time. You're going to see where, which of the AWS accounts, which of the resources, and you're going to see what did the person do. It was an API call. What API call did the person make? And then you're going to see another thing called how. How is the person able to make this API call? The person logged into the AWS console. The person used the CLI, and also you're going to see the IAM that the person used to be able to do that. I recently noticed that you can, if you create an IAM user, until you enable certain, you must enable or grant that IAM user at least one permission for him to be able to do anything when he or she logs into the account, even the least things. So that IAM permission that depends to do whatever he or she did, CloudTrail is going to also show it there in the.
So is she still audible? Or is it from
I
my head?
think she's muted.
No, I can't hear her again
No,
as
I
well.
cannot
Yeah,
hear her as well.
probably her internet.
Okay, just give us a minute, please. Let's try and rectify that.
I think it's our network. So
She's not muted.
yeah, it's our network, but she's saying something very, very interesting. So all right, so I will have to drop now. My son has a basketball game, so I have to prepare him. So it's nice meeting every one of you, and
All
thank
right,
you all.
thank you
All
very
right.
much for
Thank you very much.
your expertise.
Thank you.
Hello?
Oh, she's back. Yeah, she's back. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can hear you now.
I'm sorry. We're in Nigeria, so, and I'm using two networks. So
Yeah, I just told them that you're saying something very, very interesting, and it's your network. So please continue.
okay,
All right,
yeah,
please go ahead.
thank you very much. So as I was saying, so all of these are what GuardDuty is going to bring to the findings. But then if you want to have a more detailed look from GuardDuty into your CloudTrail event, when you enable a trail, this doesn't come by default. Like I said, CloudTrail logs all your trails by default, whether you enable a trail or not. But when you are trying to enable a trail, and this is where cloud costs, for the person that asked about, how expensive it can be to use certain things, if you use AWS config, please, I may have to go find the CLI, what is it called? The CLI command for you to be able to disable it. Sometimes it can be very tricky to disable, and it is quite pricey. It is
I have to say,
expensive.
sorry. I know what she's saying because you should be able to disable it in the UI and you're your own. Just
Yeah.
this was weaker. So yeah.
So you can use a cloud shell to just use that
Let,
command to disable
let me
it.
drop it
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna drop it there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So, and this is the same with GuardDuty and CloudTrail. When you enable CloudTrail, you have an option to log management events, high-level stuff, high-level API activities, and you have another option to enable data events. That is things that happen above, just accessing S3 bucket. What happened when you accessed an S3 bucket? You actually uploaded a file, right? Or you actually downloaded a file or something else at that level. So when you enable this management event to get logged by your CloudTrail, trust me, you're going to be in for a long ride when it comes to paying. So, and then GuardDuty picks all of this stuff, and when it does that, it produces an alert for you in the threats feed there on GuardDuty. And again, this is part of what CloudTrade does, but for some reasons, GuardDuty is still able to get it without CloudTrade, the VPC flow logs. So if you create a VPC, it is supposed to be a private virtual network, meaning that it shouldn't have some kind of by default public access, especially when you have things in your subnet and the rest of it. So let's take, for instance, there is an EC2 instance or a database inside a private subnet. You're supposed to this resource in your private subnet is not supposed to have go out to the public. But if it is going to, there is a reason for it to go out to the public. You have to use, is that, I've forgotten what network interface or something that you have to enable for you to be able to talk to something outside there on the internet. So if this network interface is not enabled, and by default, whatever resource you have in that private subnet should not be there, this is a bad case. Maybe somebody has actually probed into your account or something. This is a very bad thing to happen. AWS GuardDuty is going to alert you on this based on the flow of traffic going in and out of your VPC. The same thing with DNS. So when you have um, your resources making DNS queries to some command and control servers or some malicious domains out there, it is a very bad case scenario. So GuardDuty is going to bring this, and is going to look at this with the threat intelligence feed that it has within it to know, okay, this is actually very wrong. And I work with GuardDuty as a security operations center analyst, so we see GuardDuty stuff every day, and most times they are so detailed that most times you're asking, why am I getting this alert? But it can't just see things and then keep quiet at it. So the next tool that we use here that we're going to talk about is the AWS Security Hub. So someone has asked if AWS Security Hub is a SIEM. It cannot be equated with a SIEM. I mean, a SIEM has more advanced and extended capability than AWS Security Hub, but you can also integrate AWS Security Hub to your SIEM. So it all depends on the workflow of your company and the kind of security tools that they use. It's not all companies that use AWS Security Hub, right? So you might just send stuff directly from GuardDuty, directly from config straight to your SIEM. It all depends. But if you don't have, maybe some kind of startups that you don't need or you can't afford to get all those advanced tools, you can just use AWS Security Hub to get everything, to have that central view. So instead of going to GuardDuty to see what GuardDuty has brought, or go to config to see what config has brought, just use AWS Security Hub to look at them. You can just have the dashboard displaying on one of your screens. If you want to have that same feeling when you use AWS Security Hub. So it gives you a dashboard and a consolidated and very comprehensive view of your resources across all AWS environments. So now, how can you integrate how does it pull finding from GuardDuty? That is why if you look at the theme of the workshop, it is automating AWS and cloud security with GuardDuty, config, and security hub. So from config, from security hub, from config, from GuardDuty, we learned at security hub, right? If you can go to, if you use AWS Machi, it has a way of, scanning your S3 buckets. Is something like a DLP, a data loss prevention tool inside AWS that helps you look at your S3 buckets, deep within your S3 bucket, to look for, PIIs and some other security, measures that it has to apply for data, but it's strictly for data. And then AWS firewall and a fleet of other AWS services that I cannot, that can't contain in this slide. So it brings everything together to give you that very grounded visibility into what your other cloud security tools are doing on the background. So another very key thing I want to, this is just like for us to be able to have this very
So
look
sorry,
at
please,
the.
please, can you go back a slide, please? Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you were mentioning something SIM. I didn't really get what you were trying to say.
So
SIM.
a SIM is a security information and event management tools. So it's like a very big advanced tools that you can integrate with every other tool you have, security tool you have, so that you can have in security there is something we call a single pane of glass. So if you're using AWS, you are using Azure, you are using GitHub, you are using firewall, you are using Cloudflare firewall, you are using FortiGate firewall, you are using any other tool out there that is not AWS. You can use the SIM to aggregate all the logs. So everything that GuardDuty gets, that, or if you're not using Security Hub, if GuardDuty gets a finding, it sends it to the SIM. If your firewall gets a finding, it sends it to the SIM. If there's something wrong with your GitHub, if there's something wrong with your Kubernetes control plane, it sends it to the SIM, so that from the SIM you are seeing what the issue is and you can now remediate it from the SIM. So this is for people who work in security operations center, security analysts like us, to be able to help you, like the way Mr. Shehu did that remediation. If it is on my own end, it should come to a SIM and I'll now remediate it from the SIM, and the issue will go to AWS and it will get sorted there. So that is what the SIM does.
Thank you so much. What's the spelling, please?
SIEM, Security Information and Event Management.
Oh.
Okay, so then this is our automation logic. So GuardDuty detects threats, and then AWS config, it monitors your compliance, and then it aggregates the findings in your AWS Security Hub. And this reporting and notification, like I said, is very important. You want to know what Lambda is automatically remediating. In as much as you are the one who set up this remediation, you want to be sure that, okay, a remediation has happened. You want to get a notification of that, especially either before it happens or either after it has happened, or both. You want to be sure that the team is aware of all these things, especially when they are not, looking at the tools. They won't be sitting there all the time to look at the tools. So all this reporting notification informs the team that, all right, there's something going on or something has gone on, so that you know what is happening on the fly. Then another thing I would like to talk about in this is multi-region or multi-account scenarios for all these tools. So Mr. Shehu told us that, config, GuardDuty, they are all regional services, meaning that you have to always go to the region where you want them enabled for you to be able to get them or to be able to see everything that is happening there, right? So, but that is not all, right? All these some of these tools, there is a way you can get to tweak them to have um that regional feeling or have a few of the regions that you're using. Of course, there's no way you have all the your resources deployed in all the regions in AWS. I'm not sure that use case actually exists, but even if that is so, so you can have, apart from config, it is purely regional. You can't, there's no way for you to be able to, try to have all regions integrated. But okay, this is for multi-region config, has to do with different accounts. When you want to use AWS aggregators, you have to, if you have, let's take for instance, you have 10 accounts in AWS and you have an AWS security AWS organization that is the primary account, and out of that you created maybe 10 accounts for high level or big organizations, and you want to have a more detailed view of all of those environments. You can be able to use AWS config aggregator to be able to get to look at that. Also, AWS security hub also have a way of you to be able to have a multi-region. Actually, I can't remember from the top of my head what the multi-region um, tool for the multi-account tool for AWS Security Hub is, but there's a way for you to be able to use it within an organization. And when you do that, that means you don't need to go to those different accounts for you to be able to, um, you know, get the things that AWS config and GuardDuty and some other tools are bringing. You can just have all of them in one, coming up in one tool and in one security hub. And again, like most times, these things don't happen on a daily basis, right? So there's no point, especially if you have let's take for instance, you have a very busy AWS environment, you might want to just do this at account levels. But if your AWS environment, you just have a few accounts, like maybe 5 accounts and 6 accounts, maybe prod, dev, staging, and finance, and the rest of it, and they are not all that noisy, you can just have that multi-regional scenario come up for you to be able to see everything on the fly, right? And the same thing with GuardDuty. GuardDuty is also regional, but you can also configure it with your AWS organizations and to be able to get more detailed view into what is going on in other regions and in other accounts. Then the last but not the least is different automation approaches. So we saw how you can use Lambda to, carry out the automation. And this automation is basically remediation automation, because these tools on their own, they know how they do the work. Like for GuardDuty to be able to go to CloudTrail to pull the log, it's an automated event. You don't trigger it yourself. But if you want to, initiate a remediation automation, there are different ways you can do that. You can use the Lambda, you can use the SSM, and then you can either make the automation event driven or scheduled. So if you use Lambda, you can have a Lambda function that will run whenever there is a finding in either config or GuardDuty, or a finding that has been pulled from config and GuardDuty to AWS Security Hub, or just anything, it will just run once there is an event. That is just the logic behind it. Once this happens, please trigger an auto remediation. Or you can use an SSM based automation. So SSM, the system manager, is very, very popular when it comes to managing systems, especially when you have EC2 instances. It's just like the IT support you have inside AWS. It helps you to do apply auto patchings and the rest of it. So depending on what tool you're using and what the use case is, you would choose whether you want to auto remediate with either of these tools, or you choose whether you want to manually remediate. Manually remediate is when you want to have a security analyst come to look at it to know if it is something you should just let go, or something that you should look, something that needs a more deeper attention, or something that we should just let it use automated procedures and the rest of it. So event driven means that, so sometimes it is not let's say for instance, you have a Lambda automation that is running, and it is driven by an event. The event is that AWS config or GuardDuty found something, and because they found something, or those it found something, the Lambda works or gets triggered to be able to run its code to automate. But then if you have a scheduled automation, you can say, okay, whatever it finds during the day, I don't care, but the for at a certain time of the day, either your SSM automation or your Lambda function, please at a certain time of the day, go check if AWS config or AWS GuardDuty or something on the security hub found anything. If it did, carry out this automation, so that maybe you can have all your event finding, all of them get automated at the same time of the day, or just how how you think your environment works, or how your team responds to security events and the rest of them. So either of them works, and if you choose to manually remediate, it also works. Everything depends on what is going on, and that is why the SIM is also very important, because it brings whenever something happens immediately. That is why you have instant response, part of a cybersecurity analyst role. So the 365, the 27 hours over 7 monitoring that goes on, somebody has to be on the same screen waiting for this kind of event to happen, so that once config sees something, or it's something from the GuardDuty, something from security hub, it goes straight to the SIM, and a security analyst is already there waiting for it to happen. So he or she will look at it to know if it's something that they can manually automate and manually remediate, or just let go of like that. So this is it for the for the section. If you have any questions, you can bring it on. Let's see how best we can answer that. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Angela. That was a very insightful session. Now we are all open the floor for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please use the raise a hand feature, or just post your question in the chat box. So that you just use the raise a hand feature, so it won't be rowdy. So I'll call us one after the other, or just send your question on the chat box. Any questions? Let's have them within. Let's just take some few questions. I believe you all can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. So if you have questions, please, you can just indicate you have a question, or send it on the chat box, so we can take some questions before we round up.
I have a question for Angela. I can't
All
find
right,
the hand.
please go on.
So it's about cost. I noticed you repeated it during the presentation. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I've really learned a lot. So the reason why I asked that question is I started using AWS like 3 years ago, but I had to go and learn another cloud platform, and I had to come back late last year to AWS. So when I'm doing my work, like cost keeps coming up. So if, for example, we have to build this, we might have to incur some cost, which we are now aware of. Maybe we just turn on an instance, and then we just start getting charged. So I don't know, how are we able to go through that, because working on the cloud is something that is very practical. You need to build stuff, and I believe we should be more practical about it, like to really know we need to build stuff. So how can we, while trying to build stuff, we're not actually putting ourselves at risk of getting charged?
All right, James, thank you for that question. So There is no way, I can't say that there is a way that you work on the cloud without charge. It is a price that you must pay. But there is, personally, I have an approach to it. So I always get a walkthrough. I am very sure of what I want to do before getting on the cloud. And I want to also tell you that I think AWS is actually, cheap relative to Azure. They are not, Azure is actually a bit more expensive from my experience. And then how you do this is that these costs are these costs are associated with time. And one of the things to do, or a cost best practice to follow whenever you are working on the cloud, is get to know what it costs to do a certain thing, right? If you're aware of what it costs, you are aware of, you are very conscious about not extending your cost. I've used this config, I've used GuardDuty, I've used CloudTrail, I've enabled them, and I did all of this without even incurring up to 2 cents. And I did everything I wanted to do in a space of 1 hour. And aside from that, learn a cloud best practice, especially for somebody who is learning to use the cloud, to turn off. In fact, don't be able have that consciousness that you can't sleep at night. Whenever you are having sleepless nights, please go and check your cloud environment. It may be a cost that you have running there that is giving you sleepless nights. So I'm saying that whenever you want to use a particular service, go and read about, there is always an opinion out there. And it's not all AWS resources that are charged. If you use Lambda, Lambda is not going to charge you. The only time you would get charged is when the code runs. So if it doesn't run throughout the day, throughout the year, you're not going to get charged. SSM does not charge you, but config is quite pricey because it does a lot of job, and then guard duty. So disable config whenever you're done. If you don't have it enabled for more than 1 hour, you should not be able to get, even if you're going to eventually get, billed, you can't be billed more than 2 cents, right? So make sure it doesn't run for more than an extended period of time. And sometimes you would think that your resources, that you have turned them off. Go back again before you turn off your computer to check. In that way, you are keeping your cost in check. If you run this particular practical, if you do, trust me, you won't get up to $1 charge if you follow this costing best practice and you do it within a time range. Is when you leave it on. Like when you're turning off GuardDuty, please, like I mentioned, Mr. Sherry is going to share it if he hasn't shared it already. Please use the CLI. You don't need to do an SSH or go, sign in. Just use the cloud shell in your AWS environment and just run the command. It will delete everything on the spot. But if you try to do it from the management console, you're going to encounter you have blockers that you think that, oh, you've disabled this, but it's not disabled. So always make sure that, or you go to, Cost Explorer. Go there. I go there whenever I visit my AWS account. That is the first place I go to be sure that maybe something I mistakenly left from the day before is not incurring cost, so that you're able to, that is the best way. But if it is, when it comes to using the cloud, most times you have to pay for cloud costs. It's not always cheap, but not us. Like CloudTrail does not bill you by default. It's only when you enable a trail on its own, and you also enable the trail to capture events from the data, from capture data events, that you get billed. So you have to always just disable them whenever you're done and use them for a very short period of time. So I don't know if it
All right,
answers your
thank you.
question, James.
Not sure. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Let's take some more questions. Let's hear good luck, Adiole. Good luck, please.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Before I ask my question, I would like to ask something to what Angela said regarding the question that was asked. So when you are creating services on AWS, you should make sure that you know the services that cost you more, like running Kubernetes clusters and all that. Knowing the service, the charge for each particular service. If you are using S3, when you are transferring data over the internet and all that, how it costs you. Those things will help you as well. And again, when you are setting up particular services, know the underlying services that are also coming up with it that you must have set up. Usually when you are running with Terraform, you check your code very well, know other services that you have also enabled along the line. Like you may have be running EKS. When running EKS, you should know that most times you run those things with other services like Elastic Load Balancer to balance your resources. You also run with EIPs, Elastic IP addresses. So you make sure that when you, after disabling your EKS, you disable those things as well. Other underlying services. Also using AWS pricing calculator can also help you to predict the kind of charge you'll be having, maybe if you enable, or if you are trying to enable some resources on AWS, at least you have a prediction about your services as well. Like Angela also said, your budgets and all the AWS Cost Explorer will also help you to measure that, yes, all these things are in check. So that is how to make sure that you are not running under as in a high cost. Then if you can, if there are things you can do with serverless, it will help you, like running Lambda function. I have a Lambda function that in my AWS account. I'm not disabled it for like how many weeks now because I'm not making invocations. So I don't need to bother myself trying to go to disable them and all that. But I make sure that whenever I run servers and some other workloads that charges me with time, I make sure I disable those things. So my question is, how for a company that is on strict compliance with in making sure that they implement zero trust technology, how would they be able to achieve it if they are running on AWS?
Okay, good luck. Zero trust architecture is a security best practice. Not like there's no tool that does zero trust like this. The name of this tool, or it is for zero trust. So if you have the concept of zero trust from the aspect of security, is just for you to have a more in-depth view of your environment to make sure that everybody have permissions based upon, or whatever that is happening based upon what is supposed to happen and not anything else. So if you have an AWS environment, you can use the IAM is the foundational tool for zero trust, meaning that especially for your users, we have a case of insider threats is another aspect of cybersecurity that we always ignore. That is even the reason for the zero trust itself. You want to use identity and access management to be sure that there's nothing or anybody working in your environment have only the permission that they need to do a job. And this also has to do with all these tools. So you can't give, create an IAM user, or create you want to give a role to a service, and you give that service more than the role that it needs. The thing is that if for some reasons somebody else that is not the actual user that IAM is for gets into, lays hold of the user's credential, the person can do more than what the user should do. Let's take, for instance, if you have, you have junior level staff, you have senior level staff, you have CEOs. At the end of the day, somebody who is a junior level staff does not have more, um, the person does not have a lot of permissions to do more complex stuff. So if that junior developer or the junior cloud professional has more than enough permission to do certain things, if the person's account is compromised, the person can be the one to bring in threats. And even aside from that, there could be some reasons for accidental deletions and all of that. So you also want to make sure that for AWS and for your account, you have to, there is something also called privilege account management or privilege access management. This helps you to look at, okay, there are people who use the um I've forgotten the name of that role, AWS role for admin. I've forgotten the actual way that that role it is in AWS, but that is the highest role anybody can have in an AWS account. So you always come with the one who created the account. So if this is the case, these are privileged accounts. You want to make sure that the people or the users who use these privileged IAM permissions, that they are also being monitored. You want to audit every single thing that they do in the environment. We also have things called it is not the root user. I forgot AWS Cloud Administrator SSO or something. That is how the role is. So now for the person that raised root user, you also want to take away make sure that people who have the admin privileges, or even take away the role of admin privilege in all aspects of the environment and restrict it to only those who can be able to, or people who have that right. It is by their job, by the virtue of what they do for the organization, that they can be able to use that permission. The issue of having AWS accounts, right? You want to have one AWS account for one thing. You can't have your prod, your dev, your staging. You can't do everything from one AWS account. You have to make sure that everything, there is a segregation of work according to AWS account. And now you also want to have something we call perimeter defense. You want to be able to divide your network. This is for workloads running on AWS. You want to be able to divide your network. There's something we call demilitarized security. This is where, if you have an application running on AWS, this is where you and I, the people coming from the internet, can be able to interact with the application. It is different from what the application is on the other side. You have to take it to, the other side, what we call the data plane. So there are 1,001 ways. Most of them are not at the top of my head right now, but these are different mechanics that you can use to be sure that if somebody, let's take for instance, even firewall also help you to achieve principle of zero trust architecture. So if you have all of this in place, you can be able to see that IMFA2 is very, very important. You want to be sure that anybody who is trying to log into the AWS account is the person, because you have to, bring another method of verification that only the user has. That is when you use things like, your retina scans, your fingerprints as IAM, MFAs, and the rest of it. So all of this and even more are the ways of applying this zero trust architecture principle, even on your, on your AWS environment, as well as out of the cloud. You can apply it on premise, you can apply it in every other places. But basically, IAM should be able to, do a greater part of the job, because this is where the bigger cross lies. Then the other ones, it all depends on what your environment is. You can go ahead to apply the rest of it. I don't know if I got your question. Good luck.
Yes, yes, well answered. Well answered.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you very
Thank you
much,
very much.
Angela. So let's take just one more question. Let's take from Rebecca. Rebecca's hand has been up. So that's the last question we'll be taking before we take the closing remark. Rebecca, please unmute your mic. Rebecca, are you here? Can you hear me? All right, Rebecca is not responding, and time is fast spent. All right.
Sorry, Mr. Prince, I don't know, I think I'm trying to send a message on the chat, but it is directing me to you as a direct message. I want to share the CLI command to disable AWS config before the class ends.
All right.
In case
So you
they
see a
didn't get
tool.
it.
You see a tool. Just change the name there Or you can just send it to me. Let me share it to the general group.
Okay, all right.
But I've been fitting mine up
Is
since.
in this document, Rebecca. Okay.
Are you Rebecca?
No, I'm not Rebecca. I'm Patrick. I don't know how I'm the one. I'm Patrick.
So maybe you're using Rebecca's device because your name is showing Rebecca T. Ogunsaya.
I saw it too, but that is not me. My name is
All right, please
Patrick.
go ahead with your question. Go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, my question now is I understood everything, but that's the problem I have. I have a high billing in my AWS account because I run a lot of services there. So my question now is I want to pay off. When I created it, I used MasterCard, my Nigerian card to create it, Naira card. But now that I try to pay the billing that they gave me because my account is about to be restricted. So which dollar account, like which account is best used as dollar account for paying the bills off? Because if it is left for my own account only, I would have just said, okay, anytime I feel like getting that dollar account, I will get it and pay off. But the account is for me and my company. So how do I get this dollar account to pay off this bill?
All right. So AWS uses either prepaid dollar card or a savings or current dollar card. So you have to walk into, if you want prepaid dollar card is fast because you can just go to the counter and they will give it to you. Maybe it all depends on the bank you go to. Some people you will get it after a week. But if you want to get the normal dollar savings account, for you to get the card, depending on the bank, some banks will charge you $13. I think GT charges $13. The same with Access, and you need to get two referees and the rest of it. But if it is for your company, I also want to say that you guys use the normal process. Go get two referrals, people who use if it is GT and other commercial banks, you may look for people who have current accounts, whether Naira current accounts or dollar accounts, to be able to refer you. But this bank, Standard Chartered, I think I have their dollar card. I didn't go to the bank any day. I did everything online and they brought the card to my house. So, and they didn't charge me. It was free. And the referrals they asked me for are people who have dollar accounts, not people who have current accounts. So I just looked for a few friends that have dollar accounts in different other banks and they referred me. But this is the only way you can get the dollar card, right? You either use any commercial banks or you use if you use a prepaid dollar card, it works perfect. That is even what I have on my AWS account right now. But I have the other ones for Azure because it doesn't access prepaid dollar card. But for a company, I suggest that you guys get a normal savings or current dollar card. Then you can now go to all these aboki that do the change and then exchange your naira for dollar to be able to pay the bill. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Finally, what about using all these online and banking business?
They don't work. Most times they don't work and they could easily yank them out off. So like I told you, if instead of going to create cheaper cash, gig pay and the rest of them, just go to Standard Chartered, download their app, and then the same process it will take you to create with cheaper cash and all those people is the same process it will take you to create with Standard Chartered Bank, just that they may need to verify your referees. But I used to use those other accounts before. Sometimes they worked, and after a while, they stopped working, and now you are out looking for another means to use. And again, I said for a company, this is a business. You want to do things the most righteous way. So I think for a company, you should just get a bank, a dollar card from a commercial bank.
Okay, no problem. But I would have loved you to also drop the bank specified to the group, because I would also like to have my own personal account where I'll be using to run, because AWS will keep growing on it as they keep adding more service, where I'll be using to try out some services before bringing.
I also heard that AWS is introducing Naira payment, but you can also get your dollar card. You will still need it even if the Naira payment does not work. So just you can use bank, Zenith Bank, use Access Bank, use GT Bank, use Union Bank. Any commercial bank out there issues a dollar. Then if you want faster, Stanbic IBTC Bank, you can use them. Any commercial bank, just that what you should be talking about is the level of stress they will give you to create the account for you. But I'm trying to tell you that the most least stressful that I have seen so far is Standard Chartered and Stanbic IBTC. The rest, I had to stay there throughout the day for each of those process, and it still did not work out. So,
Okay, thank you very much. I'll give it a try right now after this meeting.
all right.
All right. Thank you very much, Angela, and thank you for the
sorry for barging in,
questions.
please. Sorry, I'm sorry for barging in. I wanted to confirm, is it only AWS config that we need to kill through the command line, or the other GuardDuty tools require this?
Yeah, GuardDuty, go to settings. If you go down throughout by the sidebar, you go to settings, scroll down, you see disable GuardDuty, and it will just disable. But AWS config does not have that option for you to disable config. If you use AWS Security Hub, also go by the sidebar, click on settings, go down, you will see disable Security Hub, it will disable. But you see config, you can only stop if you go to the setting, you can only stop recording, and that is what you have to do first before you go to the CLI you get, or your AWS cloud share. So stop the recording so it stops taking note of what is happening. Then go and use that command to
Okay, so it's not just the command alone. You have to stop the recording before you do the command.
yeah, stop the recording first.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for handling those questions. And thank you, every one of you, for your questions. So as we wrap up, let's just do a recap of today's takeaways. So Sheikh Musa gave us a hands-on demonstration of AWS security services, while Angela provided a deep dive into the theoretical aspects of AWS config, GuardDuty, and Security Hub. So a huge thank you to our speakers, Sheikh Musa and Angela Nekwe, for their time and their expertise. And also to you, our audience, for joining us. We say a big thank you. We've come to the end of this event. Just to inform you that we'll be having a physical event next month. We'll share more updates soon in the community channel and on LinkedIn. It's been a wonderful time today. It's been a time for us to learn so much, very insightful, very practical. And we are grateful that you attended today. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Prince.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so much happy and I really learned a lot. We keep growing every day on AWS. Angela and Shehu, God bless you guys. You guys are really great. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you guys some other time.
All right. Thank you, Angela.